Hey guys, so today's video is going to be another part of my makeup collection video, and today is going to be my updated eyeshadow palette collection. So I'm going to start in the second drawer here, so I'm going to open it up. I just want to explain before I go through all of my palettes is that I'm not going to open every single one like I did last time, like when I first got these Alex drawers, I think back like a year and a half ago. I can't believe it's been that long since I've filmed an updated version of my makeup collection, but I did go in depth opening up every single palette like a couple of months ago, so I will leave that linked below. The only palettes I'm going to open are the ones that are new, like the ones that I had added to my collection since that video where I went through all of them. So today I'm going to go through this drawer full of my smaller palettes. I'm not going to go through these highlighter and blushes and stuff because I'm going to save those for highlighters and blushes when we do those drawers, because I do have smaller ones in here, but we're going to go through the eyeshadows in here first. So I do have quite a bit of smaller eyeshadow palettes in this drawer. So the first two are my two mini Natasha Denona palettes. I have the mini Sunset and the mini Star palettes. So those live here. Already messing up my pigments. Then here I have the Dose of Colors Baked Browns eyeshadow palette. I love this palette so much. I actually did hit pan on the center shade in this palette, but I've shown these palettes so many times, and again, I'll just link that video below if you really want to see what the insides look like. Then I also have a Buxom palette. This is a customizable palette. So this one has 6 eyeshadows in it, and I also love this palette as well. Buxom makes some really great formulas. Like all these formulas, Buxom, Dose of Colors, and Natasha Denona all make great formulations, and they have great eyeshadows. And then I have, of course, the infamous Jaclyn Hill Becca eyeshadow palette. This is the Champagne Collection eye palette. I actually really did enjoy this palette. I don't really understand why so many people didn't like it, because I thought this palette was really good. So I never had any problems with that palette, so I don't know why there was so much controversy. Okay, then the newest palette in this drawer is the Kaleidos Futurism 2 Cyber Bronze palette. I should be able to open this one one-handed because it opens up like this. So it comes with a little insert, and then these are the 6 shadows in here. So I was interested in picking up an eyeshadow palette from this brand for a while, so I finally just decided to bite the bullet, and this was the first palette I had actually picked up this year with my own money, because the newest palette that I had gotten was the Storybook palette from Marley, and I got that at the end of February, but this was the newest palette that I got in March, and I really do enjoy it. The mattes are beautiful in here, and the shimmers are stunning, so I'm really glad that I picked this up and finally tried out their brand. And then over here in the corner, I have my Marc Jacobs palette. And this one is the Marc Jacobs, I believe this is the Lover palette or the Dreamer palette. I always get the name wrong. The Lover palette. So it comes with these 6 shades in here. And again, I do open it up in my other video. So that's that one. And then I have some even smaller palettes. I have my Burberry Gold Quad. This is the Burberry Gold Shimmer Complete Eye Palette. This is a small little palette. Let me see if I can open this one up. No, I can't. So, but this one is a really pretty little quad. I got that one at Marshall's. It was really super inexpensive compared to how much these actually are. I think this was like maybe $15, and this like runs for like, these quads are so expensive. They're like $60. It's insane. And then I also, this is one of my other most newest palettes. This is the Fenty Beauty Snap Shadows palette, and this is the #1 True Neutrals palette. So it comes with 6 shades in here, and the reason why I wanted to get this is because I wanted to try Fenty Beauty's formula. I'm just going to open it up real quick. And this is what it looks like. It has these 6 little shades in here, which is really nice for every day. I actually am kind of enjoying this palette more than I thought. after the first time I had tried it. I tried all the shades again a second time, and I actually really like it now. So I do like it more than I did. I think it's a really nice everyday simple palette. Then I have one of my only drugstore palettes because I did declutter a couple of them because I'm just like not crazy about drugstore palettes. But this is the Wet n Wild Not a Basic Peach palette. I had actually broken my first one of this, so I actually repurchased it because I really did love the palette. And ever since I had repurchased it, I didn't love this one as much as I loved the first one that I had. So I did hear there was kind of a couple of inconsistencies in the formula of these palettes. Like they weren't all the same. So I think that's why I don't love this one as much as the first one I had. But it's still a really good palette. You guys know how much I love Wet n Wild. And then the last eyeshadow palette in this drawer is the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette. This is one of my oldest palettes from Too Faced, and I love this palette. This is like the first palette that really got me into cool toned neutrals, and it's a really good palette. I really love the formulation in the Too Faced older palettes. I don't love the brand anymore, but okay. So then I have a couple of pigments over here. So I might just save my pigments for another video. Maybe I'll do, you know what I'll do? I'll do pigments, pigments, liners, mascaras, and then the pigments in and single eyeshadows in these drawers in another video. So I'm just going to stick to eyeshadow palettes in this video. So that is the first drawer of these smaller palettes. And then in this drawer, this is where we get to my main palette drawer. So I'm going to show you guys all of these. Okay, so I just want to give you a quick overview of what the drawer looks like. We have these palettes standing up, and then we also have a few back here of like my larger palettes, but this setup works for me. So okay, so we're going to start with the front, and we're going to start with my Too Faced palettes. So these are the 5 palettes I still have from Too Faced. I'm always on the fence about this palette, if I want to get rid of it, if I don't want to get rid of it, but I decided to put it back in my drawer yet again, even though I still have not used it since I put it on my desk, because I did want to sell a couple of my Too Faced palettes, since again, not really into the brand anymore. But I don't really feel like I would get much out of anything out of selling this palette anyway, because I had already gotten it for $15 at TJ Maxx, and then if I actually sell this, and since it's used, I'm probably only going to get like a good $5 for it, not even joking. So I don't think this is worth selling, honestly, so I'm going to keep it. It's actually a really nice palette. I think that this palette was underrated. I think it actually has some really nice glitter shadows in here. They're not super glittery, but again, I kept this palette over the Moon Dust palette from Urban Decay. I actually gave away that palette to Marley last year because I actually liked these more because they weren't as glittery, and I liked how they were more of like a soft glitter rather than the Urban Decay ones. Okay, then we have, of course, the infamous chocolate palette. So I have the first one, which is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar. I think the original one is still my favorite one out of the 3 that I have, and this one is just a amazing formulation. I really wish that the other ones were like this one because the shimmers in here are literally so stunning. These are some of my favorite shimmers ever from Too Faced, and they're just amazing. Then I have, of course, the Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar palette. This used to be my favorite palette from Too Faced, and now, honestly, like, I could do without this palette, but I was actually going to declutter this palette, like, a little while back, but then I forgot that my boyfriend had actually gotten this for me for Valentine's Day, like, years ago, like, when he had first gotten me the Electric palette and the Naked 3 palette. That was like back in like 2015, and he got those for me for Christmas, and then this one he got me for Valentine's Day like 2 months after that. So I was like, I can't get rid of this palette. He got it for me as a gift, so that would be terrible. So that's a Semi-Sweet. And then the last chocolate bar palette I have, because I just stopped collecting the chocolate bar palettes after this. I never thought they came out with really good ones. Honestly, I would probably get rid of this and get the chocolate gold palette if I was still a fan of them, but I'm just not a fan of Too Faced anymore, so there's no point in me getting it. But I actually really like the chocolate bonbons. I like the chocolate bonbons more than the Semi-Sweet. I think this one actually has a really good formula. I just don't think it's as highly rated as the first 2, but this one is actually really great. So there's some really nice cool tones in here. And then the last, and of course the most infamous, annoying release ever in the history of makeup is the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. This palette, when I had first gotten it, there was nothing wrong. Like, honestly, no hiccups in the release. And then when they had re-released it for the holidays, that was just a complete disaster, and it really turned me off to the brand. That whole scandal just really turned me off to them. But this is actually a really good palette, so I do really like that palette. Okay, now let's get into my Urban Decay Naked palettes. I only have 4 in this drawer because I did tell you guys last year I did declutter the Naked 2. The Naked 2 has always been my least favorite palette. I purchased it back when I first got the Naked 3. Then I had gotten the Naked 2, and then I got the Naked 1 last. For some reason, I collected them backwards. But I still love the original palette, so I have the, of course, OG Naked palette in here. This is a lot of people's favorite palette. A lot of people own this palette because it's a great palette. So this obviously changed the game for brands to come out with eyeshadow palettes. Then I'll show you my Naked 3 up there because I actually put it on display recently. It's up there on my shelves, which I'll go through those palettes as well. And then, of course, I have one of my favorites, which is the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. This is a great palette. I love using this more so in the summertime because I love creating these beautiful, I love warm tone eyeshadows. So this one's always been one of my favorites. I love that palette. And then, of course, I have the Naked Cherry as well. This one was gifted to me by Chip, Moment with Chip. I absolutely love this palette. It's a great palette. Honestly, out of these 3, I think this one's my least favorite, but it's still a great palette. I love the pinky tones in here, and you can actually do a lot with this palette, even though it wasn't necessarily cherry tones in this palette, because honestly, like I've said a million times, it's more like a raspberry palette for me. Or they should have just called this the berries palette, not the cherry palette. I thought it would have made more sense if they just called it the berries palette. But it's a good palette. And then I have the latest Naked palette, and again, I kept on trying to convince myself to not get this palette, and then I got it, and then it became my all-time favorite Urban Decay palette. This palette is so amazing. This is the Naked Honey palette. Oh my god, if you haven't tried this palette and you want to try a Naked palette from Urban Decay, maybe you've never tried them before, this is definitely the one I would recommend over all of them, because honestly, the formulation in here is stunning, and it's a great everyday palette. It has such beautiful gold tones in here. Oh my god, so beautiful. I love this palette. Okay, then we have the one and only Jouer palette that I have in my collection. This is the Jouer Skinny Dip palette. These are the Ultra Foil Shimmer Shadows. You guys, I want to open this one because this palette I feel like is so underrated. This palette is amazing. Like, I feel like this palette never got the hype that it deserved, as digging my finger into it. But this palette is beautiful. Like, the shimmers in here are actually friggin' stunning. These are amazing. If you guys want like just some, oh, there's my face, hey. If you guys just want like beautiful shadows and you don't want to buy like a liquid shadow, or you're kind of hesitant to use liquid shadows and you don't know like what metallics to add to your collection, this is stunning. I don't know if they still have it available, but oh my god, these are so amazing. They look wet on the eyes and you don't have to do anything to them. Like, you don't have to wet these shadows. They're amazing. I absolutely love this palette. Okay, then we have Colored Rain. We have the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. I actually really love this palette as well. This is my one and only palette from Colored Rain. Really, really amazing palette. Let's just open up this one too, because this palette's fire. Like, the formulation in this is so good. I prefer this palette over Juvia's Place. I think that Colored Rain is worth the price. I think that their formula is way better than Juvia's Place, and this was the palette that kind of put them on the map, and everyone went crazy over this palette. This would probably be my palette that is worth the hype, because I absolutely adore this palette. So, really amazing palette. Okay, we're going to open a couple of these other palettes too, because these are more newer to my collection. So this is my first and only Melt palette. I've been wanting to try Melt palettes for quite a while now, because I always hear so many amazing things about their palettes and how good their formula is. So I finally picked up one of their palettes, and I knew I wanted this one. I felt like that this was the perfect palette for me to try from them. So this is the Melt Cosmetics Rust palette, and this is what it looks like. And I freaking adore this palette. This palette has amazing mattes in here. They are so pigmented, so amazing. Oh my god, beautiful, so smooth. And the metallics in here are stunning. I think that this is the perfect balance for me of mattes and metallics. I like that there's 3 metallics in here because they go so beautifully together. I love putting these golds together. Oh my god, it's like my favorite look to do with this palette with the tarnish all over the lid. It just, oh my god, these are amazing. The mattes are amazing. Some of my favorite mattes I've tried in a long time. Oh my god, this palette is stunning. I love it so, so, so much. Okay, and then of course, you guys know I love me some Give Me Glow. So I finally decided to bite the bullet and try some Give Me Glow because I've seen so many people rave about this brand. So I got the Give Me Glow Vintage Rose palette, and this actually ended up being their most popular palette after I had bought it. I had bought it, and I think it sold out like a week or 2 later, and then they had restocked it a little while back. I think they restocked it twice, and it sold out both times, and now it's sold out. So I was really happy when I got it. So I got it back in like February, and oh my god, you guys, this palette is... their formulation is ridiculous. Like, I think people know how much I freaking love this palette so much. These shimmers are ridiculous. Like, and the mattes, I've never had a brand that I've loved the mattes and shimmers as much as I've loved this brand. Their shimmers are ridiculous. They literally look like how they do in the pan on your eyes. Oh my god, stunning. I just whipped this out 2 days ago again, and oh my god, I love it. So good. Okay, and then we have my one and only Huda Beauty palettes. I didn't purchase this myself. Again, Moment with Chip sent this to me along with the star palette in here, the little mini star palette. She bought this for me as well. So this one is the new nude palette, and I actually really do like this palette. I use this palette a lot more than I thought, and I actually really like the formula in this palette. I know a lot of people said they didn't love it because they thought that the metallics weren't that great. They thought that they were deceiving and didn't look like how they did on the eyes. But oh my god, this color story is... if this was from another brand, I probably would have picked it up because this color story is stunning. And they're actually, the mattes in here are beautiful. This is one of her best palettes. Like, I know that I've heard that the other palettes aren't that good, and I heard that the smaller palettes are shit. But this palette is good, you guys. Like, if I recommend anything from Huda Beauty, even though I do not like the brand, this palette is really good. So if you were interested in getting any Huda Beauty, I'm actually recommending a palette to you. Even though I don't like the brand myself, I'm still going to recommend something if it's good. Then I have, of course, my House Laboratories palette from Gaga. This is the Fame Room Glam Room 1 palette. I am super excited to get the new palette from her. Oh my god, did you guys see the Stupid Love palette? I am definitely getting that. I think I might have to collect all of her eyeshadow palettes whenever she releases them because it's Gaga. I wasn't going to get this originally, but then I got it, and it's actually really, really beautiful. It's a really great everyday neutral palette, but it's also really pretty to play with some colors. With the purples in this palette, oh my god, so pretty. So it's actually a really nice formula. The mattes in here are actually buttery smooth, and this has one of the best blacks that I've ever tried. Oh my god, so good. Then I have my newest palette to my collection, which is the Ace Beauté Scarlet Dusk palette. And I'll open this up and show it to you guys. I'm not going to share too much of my thoughts about some newer palettes because I really want to do a ranking all of my palettes I've gotten this year so far. I'm not obsessed with this palette, but it is good. I had never tried Ace Beauté, so I wanted to try out the brand. And this was the one that was on my list because I thought this would be a really beautiful palette from like spring to summer. Like, it has some beautiful magenta and pink tones in here for spring, and then it has these really beautiful like orangey colors for the summer, so it's good. The mattes are really nice, and some of the shimmers are beautiful. So I have played with all the shades a couple times, but I feel like it's not my absolute favorite. But a lot of people love Ace Beauté, so I really wanted to try the brand. But it's good. It's not like amazing. Okay, then I have some of my favorite palettes. Of course, I have some ColourPop. So this one is the Disney Designer Midnight Masquerade palette. I think you guys know my love for this palette. I don't even have to explain. It's one of my favorite palettes from ColourPop. Absolutely amazing. I'm actually going to be using this in an upcoming live with Anya, so stay tuned for that on Instagram. Because we're going to be doing a whole Disney Get Ready With Me. And then I have my two bigger Natasha Denona palettes. So I have the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. I actually just whipped this out and used it yesterday. And oh my god, this palette is beautiful. I love it so much. And then I have the gold palette, which I did not purchase with my own money. I got it with a store credit. I think December 2018, so I have had it for quite a while already, and this is a great palette as well. But oh my god, expensive. But Natasha Denona makes beautiful eyeshadows. Then I have some of my bigger palettes back here. So the first one is my Lime Crime Venus XL palette. You guys know I freaking love this palette. I absolutely love Lime Crime's formula. And this palette is my favorite from them. It's amazing, and oh my god, just so good. The formulation in here is amazing. Their mattes are so good, and their shimmers are stunning. And then of course, I have my beloved So Jaded palette back here. No words to describe this palette. It's amazing how I was actually going to skip over this palette. I was going to skip over this palette, and I was going to skip over the Honey palette, but the Honey palette had just came out after I had just tried all the shades in this palette. So I got this one, and I tried all the shades in there, and then I had just alternated the So Jaded and the Honey palette for like weeks. And then I had gotten the House Laboratories palette. But oh my god, love this palette so much. And then the last one under there is my Beauty Bakery Proof is in the Pudding eyeshadow palette. I actually freaking love this palette. It's really, really good for a neutral everyday palette. I love Beauty Bakery's powder products, and this palette is beautiful. I just fit it underneath those two, but I think I'm going to put it back on top just because it is a smaller palette, just so it doesn't get lost in the mix. So then I'm going to put them back like this, if I don't, like, you know, screw up everything else back here. Oh my god. All right, give me one second. All right, so I think I'm going to start back in the front, and then we'll work our way back there. So these are some of my smaller stored palettes. Like, some of these are honestly like really big, and they fit perfectly here, but these are my smaller palettes. So the first one I have in front is the original Lime Crime Venus palette. I actually decluttered the second one because the second one has always been my least favorite, but I love this palette. I used to use it so damn much. It's such a good palette. I love Lime Crime's formulation. They make amazing eyeshadows. And then I have one of my most expensive palettes besides the Natasha Denona, and this is my Viseart Warm Neutral Matte palette. Some of this expired Urban Decay spray had spilt on it a while back. I think I kept it in, like, I think maybe one of my haul bags, and maybe it spilt on it a while back, but it did damage the box, which is fine. It didn't damage the inside, but I did also drop this palette, and it damaged one of the eyeshadows, but it didn't damage it too bad for me to have to replace it, because I wasn't going to go and run out and buy another $70 eyeshadow palette again, so I just dealt with that. But Viseart makes some great eyeshadows. That is a great neutral palette, but I don't think it's worth $70, but that is a great matte palette. Then I have my one and only Luminous Cosmetics palette. This is the Lion King Sir John and Luminous Can't Wait to Be Queen palette. I just have to open this palette because I love the packaging. And this palette is actually freaking beautiful. I love the contrast between the neutrals and the shimmers in this palette. This is actually a gorgeous, stunning palette. I think they did a great job, and the metallics in here are beautiful. The gold and this shade and Nala. Oh my god. And the mattes in here are phenomenal. So good. I actually really do enjoy this palette. It's so pretty. And then I have my one and only NARS palette. This is the NARS Narcissus palette. I got this back, I think in like 2016 or something. I had always been interested in trying the NARS eyeshadow. So I got this one. And this is actually a really, really good palette. I do really love that palette. It's a really nice everyday palette. Okay, now let's get into my smaller ColourPop palettes. I'm not going to drone on too much about these because you guys know how much I love them. So I do have a couple of my Kathleen Lights ones. This is like my favorite everyday neutral palette. This is the Kathleen Lights and ColourPop Dream Street palette. I actually, oh, wait a minute. Before I move on, I just wanted to show you guys that I actually finally hit pan on Shooting Star. So I finally have pan in this palette. This is my oldest palette from ColourPop, and I finally hit pan on one of the shades. So that made me really happy. And then I have the Zodiac palette. I keep the Dream Street in front just because that's the one I use the most. But this is the Zodiac palette from Kathleen Lights. I also love this one. Then I have the first Disney palette from ColourPop. This is the Disney, it's a Princess Thing palette. Again, these Disney palettes from ColourPop are some of their best. Amazing quality. I absolutely love this one and the Midnight Masquerade. And then I have my favorite spring palette and one of my all-time favorites from ColourPop, which is the Sweet Talk palette. The color story in here is so beautiful, and the formulation of these eyeshadows are just stunning. So I absolutely love the Sweet Talk palette. And then these are all of my 9pan palettes. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. The first one I have is the Main Squeeze palette. Then I have the Honey palette, which is the yellow one. The Main Squeeze is the red one. Then I have the two Frozen ones. I have the Anna palettes. Beautiful. I absolutely love these palettes. The Frozen ones are so good. And then I have the Elsa palette. Also a great palette as well. And then the newest palette that I have is the Going Coconuts palette, which I'm going to open this one since this is my newest one. And this palette is actually really, really, really good. Oh my god, this is such a great everyday palette. If you guys get overwhelmed by big palettes and you just want something you want to use every single day, this is a great palette. The metallics in here are beautiful and the mattes blend so beautifully. I'm so happy I got this palette. I didn't think I needed it, but honestly, this palette is beautiful. The metallics in here are stunning. And then I have a couple more smaller palettes back here. So I have my Urban Decay Naked Ultimate Basics palette. I was going to get rid of this, but since I've gotten rid of my Naked 2, and I can't use my Naked 3 anymore, I want to keep this because I actually really love it. This actually has a great formula. Again, a very underrated palette. And then I have my NYX Happy Birthday palette. This was actually... Let me get rid of some of this stuff up here. I feel like there's too much clutter. This is the NYX Happy Birthday palette. This one was actually a free gift with for your birthday. If you had a birthday and you went to Ulta, you would get this. As long as you told them what your birth month was, they would gift this to you. And this is actually a really good palette. This is the only NYX palette I have in my collection. I used to have their Dreamcatcher palette, and then I used to have some of their singles back when I was nuts about NYX, because I used to love NYX so much. But this is the only palette I have from them now. Then I have my Stila palette. This is the Stila Eyes Are the Window Soul palette. I have pan in one of the shades in here as well. This is actually a really good palette. Kitten, of course, is my most used shade in here. It's so beautiful. But these were pretty good palettes. I actually had bought the more colorful one back in the day, but I didn't like that one, so I returned it and got this one. And then I actually shattered like half of the palette because that's when I used to keep my makeup collection in the bathroom. Do you remember those videos when I used to not have Alex drawers? I used to keep them in the damn bathroom, so I used to drop my eyeshadow palettes all the time. So that I had replaced it and gotten, this is actually my second Eyes Are the Window Soul palette, and I still hit pan on one of the shades in this palette. And I ended up breaking one of the shades in here as well. So this one's been through a lot. Then I have one of my favorite, and my favorite drugstore palette is the Milani Pure Passion eyeshadow palette. Milani is stepping up the eyeshadow game in the drugstore. Honestly, their new palettes look absolutely stunning, and I've been so tempted to get one of them every time I go into CVS, but I'm like, no, Caitlin. But this palette is stunning. You guys know I freaking love that palette. Then I have a Makeup Geek palette, which honestly, I think I might declutter this at some point. I'm not really into Makeup Geek anymore, and I'm not into Manny MUA. I mean, I do love some of the shades in here, but honestly, I really don't use this palette all that much anymore, but I don't think I'm going to be able to sell this because there is one shade in here that I've completely used up, and that will obviously decrease the value. So I don't know what to do with this palette, but I really don't use it that much anymore. But I do love Makeup Geek's formulation. I just don't buy from Makeup Geek anymore because what they did to the Fancy Face was so, so disgusting. I mean, I know Natasha Denona did that too, but I really wanted to try her formulation, and two of the palettes I really didn't spend my own money on. I only bought the Mini Sunset to see how the formulation was, and then the Sunrise, I just loved the color story, but I don't buy too much from Natasha Denona, but her eyeshadow formula is beautiful. And then the last palette in this drawer is the Tarte Tartelette in Bloom palette. This is my one and only palette from Tarte. And this is a good palette. I don't think I would get this today. Honestly, it's not that great. The only reason why I keep this palette now is because I have pan in one of the shades, but it's really not that good. But I don't like getting rid of palettes that I have pan in because that makes me so happy when I have pan in one shade. So now let's go to the next drawer. Okay, then we have this drawer. Mostly this drawer stores a lot of my highlights and blushes, but I do have some eyeshadows in here that are single shadows and just ones that didn't fit in this drawer. So yes, my eyeshadows overflow everywhere and I have them all over the place, but I do have a couple of eyeshadow palettes in here. So the first one is the MAC Warm Neutrals 15 Pan eyeshadow palette. I really wanted to get more MAC eyeshadows in my collection. I can't open this one-handed, and I really do love MAC's formulation of a lot of products. I'm a MAC girl. I absolutely love most of the products I try from MAC because they're just so good. They're not overrated. I think MAC makes still consistent formulas for across the board. And I wanted some staple shades that so many people talk about, like Amber Lights, which is Kathleen Light's shade, and then there's a bunch of other staple neutral shades in here, so I got that. Then in here, I do have a couple of eyeshadows in here. I did just get a couple of eyeshadows from the brand Lele Posh, so I did store a couple of them in here. So these are all Lele Posh eyeshadows. These two are the eyeshadows, and then these three are the highlights. I can see I'm already getting quite a bit of fallout from them. But these ones were the ones that were supposed to be intended as highlights. So this one's Kenzie. No, this one is Save Me. This one is Kenzie, and this one is White Wedding. But I had accidentally ordered the smaller ones. But since it makes it easier for them to store in here, and then I don't have to go and buy like an empty palette, I'm glad that I got the smaller pans. So these 5 are Lele Posh, and then all the rest of these are ColourPop single shadows. And then this one, I think it's just this one is Makeup Geek. This is one of the foiled shadows, but these are my more used shades, so that's why I put them in this palette, because I do reach for this palette quite a bit. I use the blushes all the time, but I had to transfer some of my ColourPop shadows to this guy. Then I have my Neutral Z palette. This one I talk about all the time, but this one has quite a bit of pan in most of the shades. And most of those shades are Makeup Geek, because you guys know I used to use Makeup Geek a ton. So I have pan in quite a bit of them. So the first 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, up to this shade are all Makeup Geek. And then from this shade to this row to here are MAC single shadows, and then this whole bottom row are ABH single shadows. So I have those. I've talked about them a million times, so we don't have to talk about them again. And then in this Z palette, I have the Makeup Geek foiled shadows, and then I have the Makeup Geek duochrome shadows. So the first 3 rows are all the foiled shadows up till this shadow here, and then from here down to here are all of the duochromes. So I had slowly collected the foiled shadows when Jaclyn Hill first started talking about them. I collected them. And then the duochrome shadows I had bought in a whole bundle, so I didn't have to collect them. I was never really that impressed with the duochromes though. I think the foiled shadows are better, but again, I don't support Makeup Geek anymore. But I don't want to get rid of those. I still use them for like inner corner highlights, and then I use this palette, you know, all the time because it is my everyday neutral palette. And then the last palette in here, I just thought this palette was such a fun palette from Tarte. I think I bought it at Ulta. So I got this to store some bigger eyeshadows in and some bigger pans. So this one has some fun eyeshadows in here if I can open it up. I think I can open it with this hand. There we go. And this one's a little bit messy, but you get the idea. So I do have a couple of eyeshadows from different brands in here. So this one stores some Sugar Pill, which are these first 6 shades. Honestly, I could have went without these because I don't really get the hype over Sugar Pill because I don't think that their shadows were that good. The only one I really would have liked to keep is just the red one, because the red one, this one, the Love Plus, oh my god, the best red eyeshadow I've ever used. Not that I really have ever owned a red bright eyeshadow like this, but oh my god, if you want a red matte eyeshadow, I don't even need to tell you to get this, because you just need it in your life if you need a red. This is the most amazing red eyeshadow ever. But these ones, I'm just not that, I couldn't really get down with them. I felt like I felt like I struggled with blending them, and I just don't think they were that good. And then these two are Luxie Beauty, I believe, or I think they're Love Luxe Beauty. And these are like their eyeshadow pigments. So this one is Free Spirit. This is stunning. And then I have this one, which I believe is called Sunset Mermaid. These are beautiful. And then these are some of their highlighters. And then these two are Makeup Geek. I just threw them in here. These are more of their foiled shadows. You know what? Hold on. I could fit them in here. Duh. Let me put my foiled shadows in here. What am I doing? I have room to put them actually in my palette. All right, I'm going to clean it out after this, but I'm going to put my actual foiled shadows in here, because then I can fit them all. So I'll show them to you at the end, putting them all together. Wow, I'm dumb. Okay. I don't know why I just didn't fit them all together. So I'm just going to combine the foiled eyeshadows that I put in here and also in the other one and just put them all together. Duh. Okay, and then we are coming to the last part, which are the eyeshadow palettes that I have on display. These ones just have a near and dear special place in my heart, or they're just too big to fit in the drawers. So over here, I have my very first colorful palette, which is my Urban Decay Electric palette. I love this palette, you guys. This one has such nostalgic memories for me. So, of course, I had to display this. I can never get rid of this because this one was like my first palette from my boyfriend back in like 2015. I love it. I just can't use it anymore because it is old. But I used to use this all the time for like every single colorful look. So very well loved from me. Then I also have a huge, oh my god, let me put this back. Hold on. Then we have my Kat Von D Metal Matte Palette. This palette is huge. This one I got back when it was launched during the holidays. This was the only holiday palette that I picked up that year. I was interested in so many holiday palettes that year. Like, I think it was the same year that the Master by Mario palette came out, and the Too Faced Gingerbread palette. I wanted both of those, but they were like gone in like an instant. And then they never came back ever again. And then the gingerbread palette got released this like past July. And I was like, I'm over that. But this was like one of my most used palettes when I first got it. I used it almost every day. It was such a good palette. But you know, Kat Von D, no one really talks about her anymore. And she, yeah, I just lost interest in her brand and just won't support her anymore. And then I have my Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. This was my first Naked palette. And again, this one my boyfriend got for me, along with the Electric palette for Christmas, like in 2015. I recently put it on display because I smelled it recently and it does not smell good anymore. So I'm kind of hesitant to use it on my eyes now. But this used to be one of my most used neutral palettes. I love it so much. It's definitely one of my favorite Naked palettes. And then I have this big Urban Decay Alice Through the Looking Glass palette. This is one of my collector's items. I don't really buy too many collector's items for collection purposes, but I loved this palette. I actually have used all the shades in here, and I do like whipping it out for a fun pop of color. So this palette is really nice. It's just too big to fit anywhere else, and I do really love displaying it anyway. And then I have a couple palettes over here. This is the most recent palette over here. This is the Storybook Cosmetics Fairy Tales Briar Rose palette. This one, like I said, was sent to me by Marley. And I do actually have pan in one of the shades already. I did realize that there's really not too much product in these eyeshadows. So they're not very hard to pan. So I do have pan in the shade Woodland. But the metallics in here are great. The mattes are okay, but the metallics in here are great. So I'm so happy that she gifted this to me. And then I just have some display boxes of ColourPop's Midnight Masquerade collection because I couldn't bear to get rid of these. So I just love the packaging. Like, look how stunning that is. And then the Aurora bundle. And oh my god, I love these highlights and lipsticks that were in these. But I just wanted to display those. And then I have this old Too Faced Christmas palette. I forget what it was called. But this one is the Too Faced Christmas palette. And this one, the Le Grand Palais palette, I think is what it's called. But I think I'm going to sell this because I literally only whip this out during Christmas time. And I only use it twice a year. So I think it's time for me to part with it. I'm not crazy about Too Faced anymore. So this isn't really like a collector's item to me anymore. It's just something that I could probably get rid of. So that is everything that's up here. And then I do have a couple of palettes on the side just because I won't get rid of them because they are all palettes I have pan in or palettes that I collected. So I do have my 3 Disney palettes from e.l.f. back here on my desk. I just don't use them anymore. So I have the Elsa palette, the Jasmine palette, and then the Sleeping Beauty palette. So those ones just live over here. And then I have the Modern Renaissance, and then of course my oldest palette that my brother got me. I almost said my boyfriend. And this one is my most used, and I will never get rid of this because it's so nostalgic for me. And then I also have the Modern Renaissance, which I have quite a bit of pan in these shades. I don't use it anymore because it's just not, it does not perform the same anymore, but I do have quite a bit of pan, so I can't get rid of this either. And that is it, you guys. And then I just have a couple of palettes over here that I'm going to sell. I have the Urban Decay Ammo palette, the Sugar Pop palette from Too Faced, the Peanut Butter and Jelly palette, the Mini Masquerade by Juvia's Place, and then the Full Exposure palette by Smashbox. So that is it, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this updated eyeshadow palette collection video. You guys know I love filming eyeshadow palette collections, and you guys know I love eyeshadow palettes. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on all my social media. Bye! Whoops, I forgot one more Single Shadows palette, but I keep this on my desk every single day because I keep my everyday ColourPop palette, ColourPop eyeshadows in here. So these are just my other ColourPop singles that are my staple shades that I use every single day. So this just lives on my desk and I never really put it away. So I forgot to show you. Sorry, I have pen and quite a bit of them because I use them all the time. So that is the last eyeshadow palette. So yeah, that's it. Bye. All the three of the foiled shadows that I didn't have in here before. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier, but tell me that's not more satisfying having all the foiled shadows together. So the first 3 rows up until this one are all the foiled shadows, and then from this one to this row, this last shadow, are the duochromes. So I don't know why I didn't do that earlier. So yeah, that's all my Makeup Geek foiled shadows and duochromes. Now I'm saying bye for real. So bye!